Yeah, just shrunk. Just so crazy how this little thing right here can do that. And this is how it. This is it right here, you guys. This is it. You guys are gonna be like really smart. I think like this one chapter
Speed it up.
is like the information in here is worth. Maybe that's why like the test a lot of them they have a lot of the, you know, the questions on the science part is endocrine, just because it's like, you know. So you guys are gonna learn. I think you'll gain a lot from this chapter. That's why I'm kind of going hard on you. We could just watch movies for 2 weeks. Okay, you guys good with that? Here we go. Here's an enzyme hormone because it requires a receptor on the membrane. This ends up becoming a first messenger because it needs another one down here because it couldn't get through. That means that this guy must have been a peptide, amino acid, that kind of thing. G protein activates a G protein. This active G protein converts ATP to cyclic AMP, or one of the ones. This is epinephrine, so it happens to be CAMP. Cyclic AMP activates kinases. Kinases phosphorylate and tells the cell to do something every time. So far, so good. Receptors inside the cytoplasm, not like this, but receptors just floating around in the cytoplasm, are called intracellular receptors, used for lipid. How do you figure? Because lipids are lipids, and this is mostly lipid, they can just get right through. They don't need they can get through, they don't need receptors on the outside. They may bind to receptors on the outside if it exists, but if there aren't, no problem, I can get right through. So they gotta be short-lived, because otherwise they're just getting into any cell. Okay, you guys with me? So, because this phospholipid bilayer is mainly lipid, they're able to just pass right through. Like gases too, like nitric oxide. Thyroid, steroid hormones. I'm not sure why this says thyroid. I'll come back to that. Okay. Steroid, for sure, those guys are lipid. Hormones cross the plasma membrane. For a hormone receptor, form a hormone receptor complex. The hormone receptor complex inside activates or inactivates specific genes because they can get inside and into the nucleus. You can alter later mRNA transcription and instructions. You got the instructions in the nucleus, so you can change what the cell does. Cool. Here, instead of binding here, you can do this sort of thing and get in, bind, and you guys remember, make a little RNA template, and you guys remember all that stuff. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you for that, but okay. But you guys get the difference between hydrophilic hormones and hydrophobic. how they can, how they get the message across. Okay. Hormones rapidly enter the blood and they're distributed throughout the body. Freely circulating hormones are short-lived and are inactivated when, so there's 3 ways you can, there's actually 6 ways you can inactivate a hormone. It's in the other handout that I made. They diffuse to target cells and bind. Like they may be automatically inactivated once they bind. They're absorbed and broken down by the liver, just floating around in the blood, and once they make it to the liver, broken down. Or they're broken down by enzymes that are nearby. So instead of going to the liver or kidney to be broken down, there could be enzymes floating around in the blood capturing and breaking down. Cool. Hormones bound to transport proteins stay in circulation longer. Each hormone has an equilibrium between bound and free forms. This, don't worry about. Humoral, don't worry about this. This one slide. Anyway. Okay, so now we're going to start, so that's kind of like how the endocrine system works in general. So now we're going to start piece by piece on parts of the body. We're doing okay on time and stuff? 6:30. Hypothalamus. All right, hypothalamus. Hypothalamus provides the highest level of endocrine control. Why? Well, because for at least 7 of them, up here, these hormones that are produced here can't be released until these hormones up here reach these hormones and tell them to release. So that's why a lot of these hormones, if you look, that's why they say, see, here's your hypothalamus. Look at this. Thyroid releasing hormone. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. I don't know what that one is. Can't remember. Releasing. Oh, factor. Yeah, factor. Factor is just a fancy word for protein. Prolactin releasing factor. Growth hormone releasing hormone. And by the way, I put them on top of each other. See, so the.
Oh, that's nice.
So yeah, so up in the hypothalamus, the growth hormone releasing hormone will be released and reach the pituitary gland, and then in the pituitary gland, the pituitary will then be able to secrete growth hormone, human growth, HGH, human growth hormone. So there you have it. Or, for example, the corticotropin releasing hormone, once released from the hypothalamus, reaches the pituitary gland, and then this message tells the pituitary to secrete adrenocorticotropin hormone. And then this yes, and then this is all the way down here, tells all these guys to be released. Like that. So here's your thyroid. So the hypothalamus is sort of like what would you call the hypothalamus then? You guys remember gonadotropin releasing hormone? Remember these guys? And here's your FSH and your LH, so these guys go together. These guys go together. So what would you call the hypothalamus then? Like a
Bus crash.
bus garage? Yeah.
Yeah, the bus is over.
Yeah.
What?
They can't. The pituitary makes a whole bunch of hormones, but it can't secrete them. It it cannot secrete them unless it receives a message to do so
From who?
from the hypothalamus. Not all, but some. Which ones? Well, the ones in the anterior. You have the pituitary kind of looks like a ball sack. You have the anterior pituitary and you have the posterior pituitary here.
Yeah.
And this one secretes not. So let's see here. You see how the hypothalamus produces ADH and oxytocin? It produces them, sends it through here, but then, so it's like, well, wait, doesn't the pituitary make these? Well, it technically, yeah, it secretes them. So technically speaking, the hypothalamus makes them and then sends it down to the end here, and then the posterior pituitary secretes those two hormones. So you have 1, 2, and then you got another 7 here. These are your regulatory, your ovulation cycle, all that kind of stuff, your regulation, that kind of thing. Okay, and then you also have nervous. These are some neurons here, but then you have some sympathetic stuff going on here too. Okay, so here's your hypothalamus. We're gonna like look into this some more. See, are we here, you guys?
Yes.
Coordinating hypothalamus provides, yep. Coordinating centers in the hypothalamus regulate nervous and endocrine systems in 3 ways. 1, the hypothalamus secretes 2 hormones directly into general circulation. Well, yeah, not really. To be more accurate, what would you say? It just secretes it to the pituitary, the posterior pituitary, and then the pituitary releases them. There's your 2 right there. You know oxytocin, you guys? Oxytocin, your cuddle hormone. During climax, during sex, that's released. It's also why people want to cuddle after. It's also sorry.
You're a terrible sex ed teacher.
It's true.
He said cuddle.
I must not release that because I'm like Sean Cuddle.
It's also a pheromone.
Dude, I'm
You know how
freaking teddy
people are
bear.
addicted to
God,
their
I'm
baby,
strong.
moms are addicted to their babies.
And then I fall asleep.
Can't get enough of that new baby smell.
I thought it was because during breastfeeding oxytocin is released so
Yes.
that you don't mind when someone's biting your boob off.
Yeah. Yeah, that too. But the baby also,
Hey, it's a smell?
it's also a pheromone. So a lot of our hormones are also pheromones also.
The dogs.
Why do you smell so good?
Oh.
There's your first one. Also, the hypothalamus secretes releasing and inhibiting, there's your regulatory ones, you guys, to the anterior. So these are posterior or your anterior. This has 7, so you have like 2 and another 7 here. And then the hypothalamus contains autonomic nervous system centers that control the adrenal medulla, to both of them, through the sympathetic innervation. Sympathetic, so like during sex, you go from parasympathetic mode, and then during climax you switch from parasympathetic to sympathetic, and that's when these things Okay, so
Sympathetic is the
fight or flight.
other, para is the rest and digest.
Yeah. Okay. What's a hormone?
Messenger.
What primary factor determines each cell's sensitivity to hormones? Receptors. How would the presence of a molecule that blocks analyte cyclase affect the activity of a hormone that produces cellular effects through cyclic AMP?
What?
It would stop.
It enhances it or amplifies it.
How would the presence of a molecule that blocks analyte cyclase affect the activity of a hormone that produces cellular effects? Oh, well,
You wouldn't be able to,
yeah,
the hormone is not
yeah,
secreted or it doesn't pass over the
yeah,
bilayer.
yeah. Why is cyclic AMP described as second messenger?
Because it's lipid soluble.
Because this is not lipid soluble.
It helps the, not the.
It helps the,
hydrophilic ones.
it helps the other ones, the hydrophilic ones, finish sending the message. Hydrophilic to the cell, then from the cell to the inside of the cell. That's what this guy does. Number 6, we don't have to worry about that one. That was that one slide I said to skip. That humoral whatever one. Okay. Should we stop or should we keep going?
No,
Wait.
there's a lot. We should keep going.
Okay. Okay, the pituitary. Second.
Do you mind explaining that last one? It's not lipid fat soluble?
Okay, okay. Remember which hormones were able to get through the surface of the cell to the inside of the cell? Which ones? Hydrophilic or hydrophobic?
Hydrophobic.
Hydrophobic.
Doesn't that mean lipid soluble?
Yes.
Okay.
Therefore, those hormones don't need another messenger because they can do that themselves, because they can get inside.
Oh, I answered for the wrong one.
Yeah, but the hydrophilic ones need they
They
can't
need the
get
fat
through.
soluble.
Therefore, they end up binding to the receptor at the surface, membrane receptor, and therefore this thing through a whole cascade of events eventually makes some protein converts G protein converts ATP to cyclic AMP, for example, and becomes a cyclic messenger. So therefore your water soluble, your hydrophilic will always end up being first messenger. Yeah.
Lipids are the secondary?
No, they'll just always be primary or just, they can get through, so they just don't need anything.
They don't help the first ones?
Mhm.
Okay, what about the last two?
The purine, and I think these guys are small enough that these guys can get through. These guys are made and they can get through. I know nitric oxide is a gas. Purines, I can't.
Why did I think of P or breaking down P? Glycolysis.
I think there is an example of this in the handout, so we'll actually see these purines in action. But anyway, the nitric oxide is a gas, so gases can get through.
Hold on a sec.
Yeah.
In
Okay. Rob, Mike, what's your question?
Sorry. Yeah.
Go.
I'm just wondering what it is that makes the lipid derivative hormones hydrophobic, thus not being able to pass the phospholipid barrier.
What makes them hydrophobic?
Yeah.
I was trying to explain.
Oh, they're long. Oh, like what makes them? They're
Water,
long chain fatty hydrocarbons.
Okay.
Like these guys. So like if you zoomed in on this thing, it would look like this.
And the hydrogen's on the outside.
So hydrophobic molecules tend to be really long hydrocarbons, and then these are hydrogens over here. Just like your triglyceride, your phospholipid to, you know, your two tails. Here's one of the tails here. So and I'm pretty sure you guys took this in when you got to the chapter of biological molecules. Remember you had proteins, and you study the structure of proteins, the structure of
Proteins, lipids,
what's DNA? What's DNA?
No, it's.
Nucleic acids. Remember proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, and then there was one more. Anyway, so what makes a lipid a lipid, or those lipid long chains tend to be
It's like oil and water.
non-polar, hydrophobic, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So you mentioned like magnets?
Therefore, the other guys, they're the other guys are more circular in shape, and then you have all things hanging off of the ends, and nothing wants to stick. The only things that want to stick to those are the same things, like attract legs.
No, that makes sense.
It's
Because the other structures will be charged based on how the structure looks.
Water's really tiny, really tiny. It's polar. The oxygen, the hydrogen, there's a charge, and partial charges, and that kind of thing. This is all it's fairly non-polar. All the same all the way around. Yeah. Good question. Okay. There's more to it, I'm sure. I just kind of forgetting.
Oil and water don't mix.
Oil and water don't mix.
Yeah, so that's just,
Yeah.
that would have been my answer. Oil and water
Okay,
don't mix.
the pituitary. So there is your hypothalamus. We're still gonna figure out. We still want to know which ones it secretes. We want to know. I want you to memorize which ones the hypothalamus. We just said 7, and I have a list here, but I actually want you to know which ones it secretes, to where is it going, and what is it doing. And as we kind of go through all this stuff, we'll end up hitting every single hormone and every single organ and that kind of thing. Pituitary. Also called the hypothesis, protected by the Selaturcica. I don't know if we had to know that. Selaturcica. Sphenoid hangs from the hypothalamus. Infundibulum is like the skinny part of the balls. Anterior, posterior have very different structures. Secretes 9. All are unique peptides or small proteins. So the pituitary secretes. Did I put it in the right spot? The pituitary gland secretes peptides or small proteins, hydrophilic kind of stuff. All use cyclic AMP, and of course, so automatically. Well, not. There's three main second messengers. These ones tend to be used for, are activated from these guys. These guys tend to activate cyclic AMP. But they do. You automatically know that since we're talking peptides and small proteins, they automatically need a second messenger. They're hydrophilic. Okay. Anterior. The anterior pituitary lobe contains endocrine cells. Contains endocrine cells that will make. These guys don't make anything. These guys just secrete. The hypothalamus will make oxytocin and ADH, send it down here, and then this thing just secretes. But there's actual cells over here that actually produce those 7. Cells are surrounded by a complex capillary bed. The capillaries are part of the hypophyseal portal system. I'll show you that in just a second. 2 capillary networks, and the blood vessels that link the networks are called a portal system, named after their destination, in this case, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Okay, all this stuff I'll talk about right now. All right, so you got these 2 arteries entering, and you got these veins leaving. Blood. You got this superior one and this inferior artery here. And you end up having this capillary bed here and another capillary. This capillary bed ends up being in the infundibulum. And this one here ends up being in the anterior anterior lobe. Well, the reason why there's a capillary bed here is because the hypothalamus have these cells that secrete releasing hormones, and the only way that those hormones will get to this gland to release these hormones is through these are hormones, you guys, so they got to be dumped into the blood. So here's your blood. That's why there's this blood here. It's the only reason why. But then the portal, that fancy hypophyseal portal system, that's just these 2 things right here. The portal vessel, well, the portal system is, I guess, all this all together, but the portal vessels are these 2 guys here. Anyway, so then these send blood surrounding all these cells, and that's how you get the message to these cells. What are these cells doing? Well, these guys are going to make 7 hormones, but they don't make them until they receive a message from the hypothalamus, from these guys right here. These here are also making hormones, but it's technically the posterior pituitary that secretes them. The hormones are just sitting right here in the terminal bulbs here, and the ends of these cells here.
The neurons?
They're like specialized cells. These are neurons. Those other ones over here, those are neurons, but these are like specialized cells. They look like neurons. Yeah, yeah. They're I would just call them like specialized cells. But anyway, here's your blood, and that's how you get it, dump it into the blood. Every time you're talking hormones, you got to dump it into, pretty much you have to dump it into the blood, unless we're talking interstitial fluid, if you're just sending a message to a neighboring cell. That's what those other 2 slides were talking about. There you have it. Altogether, it's called your hypophyseal portal system. 2, and then a couple more that we'll talk about that send it to the adrenal glands. Okay. We'll regroup at the end and just see how much you guys hate me. Okay, here are the 7. Thyroid stimulating hormone, that's kind of easy to, if you just saw this, that's kind of easy to remember. If you want to like go back to that thing that I made you, the table, so I just gave you these guys, I think. I don't know if I actually wrote out the whole thing. Thyroid stimulating adrenocorticotropic hormone. It sounds crazy. It's just the adrenal glands. This thing will reach the adrenal glands to secrete epinephrine hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone. But if you just say that like in a regular, conversation, you just sound really smart. So you could just say that.
It is a good one.
Follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, there's prolactin, that's kinda, we've done these three a whole bunch of times, I mean, yeah, these two, there's prolactin, remember, milk? Growth hormone, or human growth hormone, same thing. And then melanocyte stimulating hormone. These are really, these really only are active like when when we're babies. After that, we like kind of just, you don't really need hormones to make color, it's just the sun and stuff like that. Anyway, but there they are. So, is it possible to like memorize these? Like,
Probably.
like to remember that those are in the anterior lobe, and then you have your oxytocin and ADH in the other one. That's definitely most of the hormone. I mean, that's definitely a huge chunk out of all this stuff.
Okay.
Flag top.
Time to go, or keep going? What's that?
Flag top?
35.
Flag top for the
Oh,
anterior.
I love names.
Just stop me one. What's that?
Flag top for the anterior.
Oh,
You have to do O for prolactin.
okay. All right, thyroid. The thyroid and the parathyroid. These are probably maybe the two of the easiest ones to do because they're opposites. Thyroid and then the parathyroid are just these little like red dots on the back of it. Thyroid. The thyroid hormones are secreted once the thyroid stimulating hormone, releasing hormone from the hypothalamus tells it to release. Targets the thyroid, this targets the thyroid gland, triggers the release of thyroid hormones. What are they? T3, T4, and calcitonin. It's on your list there. Okay. Thyroid, where are you? Here it is, way up here.
Do you use any of these in Words with Friends? That would be sweet.
Here they are. T4, T3, thyroxine, triiodothyronine, T3. What is all this? What is all this stuff here? What's the 3 and the 4 stand for? It's just the number of iodines. Calcitonin, so those 3, okay, you guys? And then whatever if you could just remember what one does, the other one does the exact opposite, okay? So,
Oh,